I committed unto him against that day. I know not how the saving grace to me he did impart, nor how believing in his word brought peace within my heart. But I know whom I have believed and am persuaded that he is able to keep that which I committed unto him against that day. I know not how the Spirit comes convincing men of sin, revealing Jesus through the Word, creating faith in him. But I know whom I have believed and am persuaded that he is able to keep that which I committed unto him against that day. Know not when my Lord may come at night or noonday fair, nor if I'll walk the veil with him or meet him in the air. But I know whom I have believed and am persuaded that he is able to keep that which I committed unto him against that day. Sir, appreciate you.
All right, I appreciate those songs. If you're around me very long, you'll figure out pretty quick that hymns are one of my favorite things. I especially appreciate that last song, I Know Whom I Have Believed. What I really, really appreciate is the smile on the sister's face as she was singing those words. The words, you could tell, mean something. And it's a blessing to see that. It's really, really neat. But I think I was here, I think I preached here once about 5 years ago. My wife was with me at the time, but she wasn't here. We got to the hotel and one of the kids got sick and she had to stay back. And I think it was me and Sierra ended up coming. And but it's been a few years. But we appreciate the opportunity to come back. Greetings from Independence Baptist Church in Forestell, Missouri. Brother Paul and Brother Philip are both members there. And so I told somebody earlier that me and Tanya are the ones that join the families together. Paul Reynolds is my wife's brother, and Mandy Thomas is my sister. So we're kind of the glue that holds them together. Maybe not, but sometimes if you know me very well, I'm probably the one that stirs up the strife between them. But we really do appreciate the opportunity to be here. That song, Redeemed, how I love to proclaim it. I tell you what, if you've been saved by the blood of Jesus Christ, redeemed is a word that you should love passionately. Because when you recognize what it is that you were and what he did for you, that will, tell you what, if nothing gets a hold of you, that will. There's the song, I love to tell the story, or the old story, and I think it's the old story. It talks about that when you feel that this world is getting to me too much, then what I need you to do is to tell me the old story, because it's the old story that reminds me of Christ and what he's done for me. And those words that we sing, too many times I'm afraid I'm guilty if I get up and I sing these songs, and I've known them since I was tiny. I could sing them without the songbook. And unfortunately, sometimes we do that. We aren't thinking about it. And it's just, it's good to remember what the Lord has done for us. All right, that's not the message. Sorry. The other thing, before I get into the message, I generally try to, for those of you that may not know me very well, like I said, I preached here about 5 years ago, but a lot of you may not know me. I am a member at Independence Baptist Church in Forestell, Missouri. I've been going to that church all my life, but I wasn't saved until I was 26. The Lord actually convicted me of my sins and saved me at the age of 26, called me into the ministry at the age of 33. And to understand a little bit about my testimony, I can't really start with the Lord saving me at the age of 26, because when I was between the ages of 15 and 16, I made a false profession of faith. I'd been going to church all my life. I knew all the right answers. And when somebody came and said, hey, here's some passages, do you believe this? And I said, yes, I do. And somebody said, and I disagree with this, but somebody said, great, let's go tell everybody. And so I said, hey, I've tried everything else. Let's try that. And so I went in front of the church. I told everybody I'd been saved. It wasn't long before I knew there was no change in me. I even started teaching devotions. And me and Tanya were very interested in each other. She was lost at the time. Everybody thought I was saved. I went to my parents, and I was going to ask Tanya to marry me. Don't do the math on how old I was. My parents said, we can't agree to that. Well, you know what? I had no root. I had no, there was nothing there. And so it was really easy for me at that moment to stand up and say, well, you know what? It really doesn't matter, because I wasn't saved to begin with. And broke my parents' heart. But at that point, I stepped back completely, and I wanted nothing to do with the message of salvation. I kept going to church. Me and Tanya did eventually get engaged. We got married. We still went to church, but I avoided the topic of salvation as much as I possibly could. It was something that I had been there, quote unquote. I had been there. I had tried it on my own. I wanted nothing to do with that. It was the most miserable point in my life when I was living a false profession. And the Lord saved Tanya. Tanya started praying for me. Tanya started doing little things to get my attention and to keep that message in front of me. And she believed that the Lord would save me. And time went on and he didn't. Time went on and he didn't. We had a couple kids. And then at the age of 26, one night the Lord, it's interesting how the Lord works. The Lord, I had a cold. I had taken some cold medication. I tell people that lots of times cold medication knocks people out. Well, I'm the opposite. When I take cold medication, my heart races and I get more energy than I already have, which is not a good thing. But I was laying there in bed that night, and my heart was racing. And the Lord, in that still small voice, he didn't literally talk to me. Don't misunderstand me. But the Lord reminded me, because I am a guy that wants to be in control. Even if I didn't believe drinking was wrong, I wouldn't do it because I hate being not in control. But the Lord, it's almost as if he spoke to me. He said, you can't even control the beat of your own heart. And in an instant, I could stop it. You would die and go to hell, and you could do nothing about it because you are a filthy lost sinner, and you can't even control your own heartbeat. And for the first time, even though I was born and raised in church, for the first time in my life, I really knew what it felt like to be lost and hopeless and undone and in need of a Savior, which seems kind of funny at the age of 26 when you've been born and raised in church. You know all of the stories, you know all the verses. But the first time I really, really understood what it meant to be lost. And the Lord got a hold of me that night. And I went up front, I got my Bible out, and the Lord started bringing back all these verses. And that night, the Lord showed me what I was, and He redeemed me. And it was different that time. The first time, it was all about me. It was all about what I was doing. The second time, it was what He had done for me. And the Lord saved my unworthy soul. And I was at the age of 26. And from that point forward, I pretty well just said, you know what, I want to do whatever the Lord wants me to do. And everybody kept coming to me and saying, you're going to be a preacher, you're going to be a preacher. And I'd say, if that's what the Lord wants, that's what He wants, but that's not what He wants. But, you know, eventually the Lord got a hold of me, and every time I would sit in the service, every time I'd sit in Sunday school class, there'd be this little nagging of, you have said you will do whatever I want you to do, but you're not. And every time I'd open up my Bible, it was almost as if there were sermons that were coming. And it's like, I'm not a preacher. I don't need a sermon. But the Lord started using that, and the Lord showed me that He said, you know what? You've told me you'll do whatever you want me to do. Will you? And that's when I surrendered to the ministry. Now, I didn't know then, and I still honestly don't know 100% what he wants. But I need you to pray for me. There where we are in Forstell, there's not that many churches. It's a very Catholic area. St. Charles, St. Peter's, St. Louis, Lake St. Louis. You kind of get the idea of the history there. There's a few, but not many. You probably, from our church, you've probably got to drive a good hour and 15 minutes in one direction. If you drive the other way, you're probably going to drive further than that. But there's not many churches in our area. So our church is kind of looking at what do we want to do in the area. Does the Lord want us to kind of reach out? We sit right on the edge of about, well, it's the largest populated portion of Missouri. And so, you know, we feel like we're there for a reason. What do we need to do to reach out and spread the gospel? So pray for us as we look at what the Lord wants us to do. Again, all of that about 3 messages into today. If you would, turn over to the book of Joshua. This is the real message today, I should say. Joshua chapter 4. It's interesting how the Lord works as you pray about what to preach, and you study and you look at stuff. Joshua chapter 4, I had preached a message out of this chapter long ago, not long after I was called to preach. And I brought a lesson on it even, I think, before that in one of the Sunday school classes. And then here earlier this year, I had also preached a message, a totally different message out of a different chapter. And the Lord showed me that these 2 messages actually go together. They were preached years apart from each other, but they really, really go together. And so what I want to try to do is I'm going to preach about a monument to the blessings of the Lord or a memorial to rebellion. 2 different sermons that really go together. All right, Joshua chapter 4. We got a lot of reading to do. We're not going to read the whole chapter, but I'll read enough of it to kind of give the idea of what we're talking about. Here in verse 1, it says, And it came to pass, when all the people were clean passed over Jordan, that the Lord spake unto Joshua, saying, Take you 12 men out of the people, out of every tribe a man, and command ye them, saying, Take ye hence out of the midst of Jordan, out of the place where the priest's feet stood firm, 12 stones, and ye shall carry them over with you, and leave them in the lodging place where ye shall lodge this night. Then Joshua called the 12 men whom he had prepared of the children of Israel out of every tribe of man. And Joshua said unto them, Pass over before the ark of the Lord your God into the midst of Jordan, and take ye up every man of you a stone upon his shoulder, according unto the number of the tribes of the children of Israel, that this may be a sign among you, that when your children ask their fathers in time to come, saying, What mean ye these stones? Then shall ye answer them that the waters of Jordan were cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord, when it passed over Jordan. The waters of Jordan were cut off, and these stones shall be for a memorial unto the children of Israel forever. And the children of Israel did as Joshua commanded, and took up 12 stones out of the midst of Jordan, as the Lord spake unto Joshua, according to the number of the tribes of the children of Israel, and carried them over with them into the place where they lodged, and laid them down there. If you go down, we'll read the last few verses of the chapter, starting in verse 20. And those 12 stones which they took out of the Jordan did Joshua pitch in Gilgal, and he spake unto the children of Israel, saying, When your children shall ask their fathers in time to come, saying, What mean these stones? Then ye shall let your children know, saying, Israel came over this Jordan on dry land, for the Lord your God dried up the waters of Jordan from before him, or from before you, until ye were passed over, as the Lord your God did to the Red Sea, when he dried up from before us, until we were gone over. You find here in Joshua chapter 4 a very interesting story. The children of Israel, of course, had wandered in the wilderness, and now it's time for them to go in. They're going to cross over the river Jordan, and just like he did at the Red Sea, the Lord kind of dries up the land, and they're able to walk over. But Joshua has a command from God that they're supposed to take these 12 stones out of the midst of Jordan, and then they're supposed to make a memorial, and it has a very specific purpose. It's not an idol. It's not meant to be something they worship, but it is meant to be something they do so that in future generations, when those people look at those stones, they'll say, what is this all about? And it is a perfect opportunity for the fathers and the grandfathers to look to their kids and their grandkids and to say, well, it's interesting that you should ask. Here's what the Lord did for us. Here's what the power and the majesty of God Almighty can do in our lives. That was the purpose. It was meant to be a memorial and a reminder of what the Lord had done for them. But not just for them, but when their kids and their grandkids came to them and said, what is this about? They tell them what God had done for them. Okay. Before we go any further, let's go ahead and stop. Let's go to the Lord in a word of prayer and ask him to bless in the message today. Dear Heavenly Father, I come before you thanking you for all that you've done. Lord, I know I don't deserve to stand here, and I know that I can't do this without you. And I ask you might just bless and protect. You might just take the words, Lord, and that they might be a blessing and encouragement. And Lord, take my fumbling out of it, and Lord, just take and use it. I know that it's you and not me. Lord, I ask you might just bless this church. We're thankful for them and the White House they are here. Lord, we ask you might just be with them as they search for a pastor. Lord, we ask you might just help as they've got some members that are away today. Be with them. Lord, we ask you might just help me today as I try to bring this message. And most of all, Lord, we think about those that are lost. They might see their need of you, that they might be redeemed. Lord, that we might be an example and a shining light, that we might constantly point back to you, that we might not pass up the opportunities that we're given to talk about what you've done for us, especially in salvation, but also, Lord, in the ways that you've blessed us after salvation. Lord, help us as we try to raise our kids, as we try to help with grandkids or nieces and nephews and just people that we come in contact with, that, Lord, that we might be our lives and our words might be a memorial to you and the things that you've done for us. Lord, we ask you might help us. In Jesus' name, amen. As you look here in Joshua, it's really neat, all of the things that the children of Israel had been through and all of the places that they had gone and the ways that the Lord had moved. You want to talk about a people that had something to tell, they had something to tell. But they're just like you and me. As you look at the children of Israel, whether it's at this time or in the time of the judges or different times, they were so quick to forget what God had done for them. They were so quick to praise him one minute and complain the next. And before we cast too many stones at them, I think we have to realize that we're not much different. we sometimes do the same thing. You know, and as you read the Bible, you realize that many, many years pass sometimes between one verse and one chapter. And you look at them, and it's so easy now looking at it going, well, what is their problem? What are they, what? Come on, the Lord just did this, the Lord just did that. But again, how many times do I receive a blessing of the Lord, and then I walk out that door, and maybe I remember for a day and a week and a month and a year, but then what happens? And the next thing you know, I'm whining or I'm complaining or whatever, and I've forgotten what the Lord has done for me. In this case, and I want you to be careful, I don't want you to walk out of this door thinking that John thinks that we should start building a bunch of monuments and idols all over the place. I think you have to be careful. The children of Israel, and we don't have time to turn to all these places, but the children of Israel, in this case, were commanded to build a memorial, to build a monument, and to tell their kids and their grandkids what had happened. You know, there's also times when they take those things and they misuse them. If you've ever done a study on the brazen serpent, it's probably a good example, right? They got bit by snakes. They put the brazen serpent up there. They had to look and live. It's a great story, right? It's a great picture of salvation. But yet you find in the time, I believe it was in Hezekiah, you find that the children of Israel had turned and started worshiping that same brazen serpent. And Hezekiah had to break it in pieces. So anything that we have as a reminder of what the Lord has done can become an idol if we're not careful. But I also want you to understand that it's not a bad thing to have things that remind you of what the Lord has done for you. My grandparents lived right across the street from the church, and there was a set of railroad tracks that went between the two. And one of the best examples, I think, of this for me, a personal example of this for me, is my grandparents were going through a really hard time one year, and there wasn't a lot of money. We were having a special Bible Institute, and my grandparents wanted to have one of the guest speakers stay at their house, but they could either pay the bills or they could buy the extra groceries for having the guest speaker. But they really felt like that's what the Lord wanted them to do, and they felt like if they did what the Lord wanted, He would bless. And so they had the guest speaker, they kept him, they bought the extra groceries, and at the end of the week, there was a train that got stopped right outside of their house, and it was carrying wheat. And something went wrong with one of the cars that was carrying wheat, and it had dumped a bunch of wheat right out on the train tracks. And Grandpa went out there to see if he could help. And they basically said, well, we're just going to push the wheat off the tracks, and we're going to keep going. And so Grandpa got a shovel out. He helped them get the wheat out of the way. And at the end, he said, well, what are you going to do with the wheat? And they said, we don't care. We got to go. And so they left. They said, if you want it, you can have it. Wheat at that time, the price of wheat at that time was pretty high. And so Grandpa got his pickup truck. He loaded 2 or 3 loads, took it down, sold it. And guess what? It was about the amount that they needed to cover the expenses that they had for the week before. You know what my grandma does? She has a little jar that she has full of some of that wheat that they saved, and she keeps it. It's either on the kitchen table or it's out somewhere. And you know what? Every kid and every grandkid that has come to her house has heard the story of the wheat. But you know what they do? They talk about the amazing power of God to bless them in their lives when you follow Him and you do what He said. Now, I do not think that little jar of wheat is an idol. Okay? It's a memorial and a memory of what the Lord has done. Now, as the grandkid of this story, I need to be careful that me or my kids don't ever turn that into the brazen serpent and it becomes more of an idol than a memorial. But we do need to find ways to tell our kids and our grandkids and those around us of the amazing things that God has done for us. Because I guarantee you, if you're sitting in this church and you're saved, He has done something amazing for you. If He saved your unworthy soul and He did absolutely nothing else, then you would have more than you could possibly tell to those around you. But I happen to know that if he saved your soul, he didn't stop there. Now, he could have. We didn't deserve what he gave us in salvation. But I guarantee you that he has done that and more for you. And not only that, but he has done that and more for you, and he's promised to do more for you yet to come. And I would encourage you to find ways to tell those around you about what he has done for you. Whether it's the song, Redeemed, How I Love to Proclaim It, or I Know Whom I Have Believed. People need to see what he has done for us. I think that the purpose of this was twofold. We would like to think that the memorial was for the kids and only the kids because they need to ask and we need to tell them. But I sometimes think the memorial was as much for the generation that went through it as it was for the kids. Because the interesting thing, it's almost as if you read between the lines in this case, you're going to know that the kids are going to have to ask, what about those stones? And they're going to hear a story that unfortunately they may have never heard. Because if you're anything like me, you go through stuff and years later you forget that everybody around you doesn't know it. And you don't talk about it anymore. You don't tell it. You don't tell what the Lord has done for you. But we need to. And so this is as much as a remembrance for the older generation needing to remember to tell the next generation as it is for the next generation to need to ask, how did we get where we are? I've been encouraging people at our church. You know, our church was started as a mission in the 60s, formed into a church somewhere around 1970, ordained as a church somewhere around 1970. And there's people, I know a little bit about the history of the church because I was the church clerk and I went back and read the church minutes and I've asked people. But, you know, there's a lot of things the Lord has done for our church that my kids have probably never heard. And the way the Lord has moved and the way the Lord has blessed, I need to encourage them to seek that out. And I need to be telling them. And I need the older generation to be telling. And so we've been trying to talk about ways that we can do that in our church. When we were out in Washington, D.C., there's a Bible museum there that we went to. And in the middle of one of the rooms, they have this round room. And the only thing in this room is a chair and a little desk and a camera pointing back and a door that you can close. And you're inside there with this camera, and basically it's called the Joshua Project. And the idea is that they want you to tell how the Lord has moved in your life and what he has done for you. And they let you sit there and record it until you're ready and you think you've got what you need, and then you save it. On the outside of that building is a TV. And as you walk up on the outside going through this, you can watch the videos of what people say that the Lord has done for them. Now, it's an interesting idea. And so at our church, we've been talking about, do people in this church know your testimony? Do they know what the Lord has done for you? And by the way, I have a video camera. If you're willing, I'll tape it. I haven't gotten too many takers. Something about a video camera makes people nervous. I think several of them have said they're willing to do it. But it's just, how can we tell the generations to come what the Lord has done for us, right? And in this case, it's a great thing because it's talking about the blessings of God. But you know, there's another story, and this one's a little scarier. But as you think about it, this one was what mean these stones. But there's another story. And it scares me. Because as you think about the children of Israel, there was so much the Lord had done for them that yet they forgot so quickly. If you turn over to the book of Numbers for me, Numbers chapter 16. I don't have time to read this entire chapter. But I'm going to try to read some of the important parts help you understand the context. You find here the children of Israel. There's a guy by the name of Korah in verse 1. It says, Now Korah, the son of Izahar, the son of Kohath, the son of Levi, and Dathan, and Abiram, the sons of Elab, and On, the son of Peleth, the sons of Reuben, took men, and they rose up before Moses with certain of the children of Israel, 250 princes of the assembly, famous in the congregation, men of renown. And they gathered themselves together against Moses and against Aaron, and said unto them, Ye take too much upon you, seeing all the congregation are holy, every one of them, and the Lord is among them. Wherefore then lift ye up yourselves above the congregation of the Lord. You have to understand here that you've got these sons of Levi. And if in some way, I guess I would say it this way, a lot of this story is all in the family. Because Moses and Aaron also came from the sons of Levi. Aaron's family was meant to be the priests. Well, they were the sons of Levi, right? Korah gets up, and he's also a son of Levi, and he says, Moses, Aaron, you've taken too much on yourself. We're as good as you are. We have as much right to lead as you do. And by the way, we've got 250 of the princes of Israel that are on our side. These are men of renown. They're well known. They're leaders in the community. 250 people of the renowned group, they agree with us that you've taken on too much. I don't have time to turn there, but if you'd looked back further, you would find that Korah didn't have a leg to stand on. God, when he had laid this out, he had given specific jobs to specific people. And yes, Korah was a son of Levi, but he was from a different son. So Levi had, I think, 3 kids, and each one of those was given a task from God to do. Korah's family had been given the task of bearing the burden of the tabernacle. They would carry the most holy things of the Lord. They would take those things, they had to be wrapped up a certain way by the priests, and then Korah and his family would be the ones that would transport those things. It was a very important job. But in Korah's case, it wasn't enough. It wasn't good enough. He wanted more. Sometimes we get that way too. The Lord gives us something to do, and it's not enough. I think about the song we sang, Little is Much, when God is in it, right? We sometimes don't get that. Sometimes we want the bigger, the better, the more. But Korah had been given a very special job. But he lost sight of the fact that it was from God, and therefore it was a great thing. He wanted somebody else's job. Just a little tidbit. 250 princes, men of renown. Just because you have followers doesn't mean you're right. That's just a little extra piece there, right? And I could get caught up in that, and I'm not going to. But he had 250 men standing behind him. He was still wrong. As you go on through the story, it talks about he spake unto Moses here. He spake unto Korah in verse 5, and to all the company, saying, Even tomorrow the Lord will show who are his and who is holy, and will cause them to come near unto him, even him whom he hath chosen will he cause to come near unto him. This do, take you censers, Korah, and all his company, and put fire therein, and put incense in them before the Lord tomorrow. And it shall be that the man whom the Lord doth choose, he shall be holy. Ye take too much upon you, ye sons of Levi. And Moses said unto Korah, Hear, I pray you, ye sons of Levi, seemeth it a small thing unto you, that the God of Israel hath separated you from the congregation of Israel, to bring you near to himself, and to do the service of the tabernacle of the Lord, and to stand before the congregation to minister unto them. Even Moses said, Korah, is it a small thing to you that God has given you something to do, and now you want to take on more? But as you keep going down through here, you find that in verse 16, and Moses said unto Korah, Be thou and all thy company before the Lord, thou and they and Aaron tomorrow, and take every man a censer, and put incense in them, and bring ye before the Lord every man a censer, 250 censers, thou also and Aaron, each of you his censer. And they took every man a censer and put fire in them and laid incense thereon and stood in the door of the tabernacle of the congregation with Moses and Aaron. So these men here are leading this rebellion. They've got 250 men. They have taken these censers and put incense on them, basically to burn before the Lord. These have now basically been, in essence, they've been sanctified. They've been made holy. There's something that's been given to the Lord. But he goes on and he tells them basically that they better get up and they better get away from Korah and all his people. And as he keeps going down in verse 28, he says, "And Moses said, Hereby ye shall know that the Lord has sent me to do all these works, for I have not done them with mine own hand. If these men die the common death of all men, if they be visited after the visitation of all men, then the Lord has sent me. But if the Lord make a new thing, and the earth open her mouth and swallow them up with all that appertain unto them, and they go down quick into the pit, then ye shall understand that these men have provoked the Lord." Now Moses says, these men have gathered together. They've got 250 censers that they've got incense that they're burning before the Lord. Moses says that the Lord will show you whom he has picked. And if something new happens and these men are swallowed up, then you know that they weren't of the Lord. Now, I don't know, in this part of Kentucky, and some other parts I've been in, they have problems with sinkholes. And sometimes the earth opens up and swallows the Corvette Museum or whatever, right? But in this case, it was not even that. Because basically, if you read what happened, the earth opened up and swallowed them and then closed back on itself again. This was divine. This wasn't that they just happened to be standing in the wrong place at the wrong time. This was divine. And so as you read down through it, the Lord basically opened up the earth. It says in verse 31, "And it came to pass, as he had made an end of speaking all these words, that the ground clave asunder that was under them. And the earth opened her mouth and swallowed them up, and their houses, and all the men that appertaineth unto Korah, and all their goods. They and all that appertained to them went down alive into the pit, and the earth closed upon them, and they perished from among the congregation. And all Israel that were round about them fled at the cry of them, for they said, lest the earth swallow us up also. And there came out fire from the Lord and consumed the 250 men that offered incense." Again, just because you've got a lot of influential people behind you doesn't mean you're right. And in the end, those 250 men were just as gone as the people that got swallowed up by the earth. In verse 36, "And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto Eleazar the son of Aaron the priest, that he take up the censers out of the burning, and scatter thou the fire yonder, for they are hallowed. The censers of these sinners against their own souls, let them make them broad plates for a covering of the altar, for they offered them before the Lord. Therefore they are hallowed, and they shall be a sign unto the children of Israel. And Eleazar the priest took the brazen censers wherewith that they were burnt, had offered, and they were made broad plates for a covering of the altar, to be a memorial unto the children of Israel, that no stranger which is not of the seed of Aaron come near to offer incense before the Lord, that he be not as Korah and as his company, as the Lord said to them by the hand of Moses." There's another reference here to a memorial. Those censers that they had put incense in, those 250 men that stood behind Korah and his followers, they were all burned up. They took those censers and they basically heated them up. They beat them into plates. They hung them on the altar. And it's very specific as to why they did that. They did it as a memorial so that whenever other people came, they would be reminded of what Korah had done, and they wouldn't go there. So we have here two different examples of where a commandment from the Lord was to take something and to make a memorial for the next generations. My question is, right now, as you live your life, are you building a monument or memorial that talks about the blessings of God? Or are you building a monument or a memorial that shows the rebellion that you have toward God's command. Because we can do either one. I'd like to stand here and tell you that I'm not capable of some of the things that these other men have done. But if we're not careful, we'll be just like the children of Israel. And we're up one minute, we're down the next. You know, if you look at, we don't have time to turn there, but in Psalms, I think it's 105 and 106. 105 goes through all of these amazing things that the Lord had done for him. And how he moved in Jacob's life and Joseph's life and all these things that he did. And then I think it's in 106, he kind of starts the chapter off with some of the similar sayings. And then in one verse, it talks about how that they sang unto the Lord his praises. And literally the next verse says, and they forgot the Lord and his ways. I mean, it's like back to back. All of these things he's done, and how one minute they're singing his praises, and the next minute they've forgotten what he's done. I don't want you to go out and build a bunch of monuments that turn into idols. But understand that the way you live your life, and the way that you act, and the way you react, and the things that you do, others are watching. And your life will be a memorial to the blessings of God and what he can do, or they can be a memorial for what happens when you rebel against God. We're sometimes faced with really, really, really bad things, but God weathers in the storm. I think about the disciples as he sent them out into the storm. And I use that intentionally. He sent them out into the storm. Right? If you read some of those passages, it specifically says that. He knew what was coming. He sent them out knowing a storm was coming. And then the disciples had to go through the storm. And he came to them, and he calmed them, and he calmed the storm, because he had something for them to learn. As he was heading to the next place where he was about to save the man that had been demon-possessed. The Lord knows exactly what he's doing. And he knows the paths that he sends us on. He knew what he was doing with the children of Israel. He knew what he was doing with Moses and Aaron. He knew what he was doing with Korah. Korah chose to rebel against it. I do not want my life to be a memorial to the ways that I did not serve the Lord. I'd rather it be a memorial to how he blessed me and he moved in my life. And so I ask each one of you, as you leave today, think about the ways that you can tell those around you what he's done for you. How has he helped you? Did he redeem you? If he redeemed you, then you've got more than you can possibly share. But don't forget about the ways that he moved in your life outside of that too. He's helped. There's things he's done for me that I didn't deserve it. Can't even tell you why he chose to do it, but he did it. We need to tell that to people. We need to proclaim his blessings. And understand that little jar of wheat, it's not an idol. It's not worshipped. It's not even meant to proclaim